Welcome to the Functional and Integrative Medicine Podcast. This podcast is all about exploring root cause medicine, showcasing the power of this approach, and inspiring other medical providers to follow this incredible path. I'm your host, Ginger Allen, and founder of Your Medical Liaison, a medical marketing agency working with medical providers since 2012. My passion for root cause medicine and provider advocacy drives me to help medical providers who have incorporated functional and integrative medicine into their practices. So let's dive in. Today's guest brings a unique and powerful lens to the world of healthcare transformation, not from the clinical side, but from the leadership and business side that so many providers need support with. We're thrilled to welcome Tracy Cherpeski, who's got her MBA, her MA, her CPSC, a business consultant, executive coach, and founder of Tracy Cherpeski International and the Thriving Practice Community. With over a decade of experience supporting healthcare professionals and wellness practitioners, Tracy helps her clients reclaim their time, scale their practices, and lead with clarity without sacrificing their health or purpose in the process. Tracy's background in strategic planning, mindset mastery, leadership coaching allows her to empower medical professionals to build thriving, sustainable businesses that align with their core values. She's worked with providers across the globe, helping them shift from burnout and overwhelm to grounded, visionary leadership. She's also the executive producer and host of the Thriving Practice podcast, where she shares insights on entrepreneurship, business growth, and personal development, always with a mission to help healthcare leaders create a life and practice they truly love. Tracy lives in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, with her two children, who remain her biggest inspiration and her driving why for building a life of impact and celebration. Let's dive into a conversation that will challenge your mindset, energize your vision, and give you tools to lead with intention and thrive in your practice. Hi, Tracy. We're so excited to have you on the show.
Hey, Ginger. Thanks for having me.
So, I built this podcast for providers to share with other providers, their experiences and, everything to do with functional and integrative medicine practices. And I love that, I met you and you really help physicians and clinicians and providers on the business side, because so often, and doctors I know get frustrated with this, that they get frustrated with the business side and the marketing side, and I always remind them, you did not go to school for business. It's okay. You did not go to school for marketing. It's okay. Like, we don't expect you to know these things. You're not expected to know these things. But if you're a entrepreneurial doctor and you have your own practice, you do need these things. So to have someone with their MBA, somebody like you to come in and really help them with their practice, we're super excited to have you on the show. So let's go ahead and get right to it. So, your background spans business consulting, executive consulting, and podcasting. What inspired you to focus your work specifically on helping providers and healthcare leaders?
Well, I started out as a generalist when I started my business almost 16 years ago now, just kind of blowing my mind. And excuse me, I always was working with highly credentialed business owners, so people with lots of letters behind their name. And in general, these are the people who have such a heart for whatever it was that they trained to do. So in 2022, kind of in the height of all things online during COVID, our messaging, we felt like it was getting drowned out. So it was a strategic move. But when we sat down and started talking about what is it that we love about, our favorite clients, and it always came back to the physician owners or the practice owners. And what I didn't realize was I had this gigantic mission growing inside of me that I had no idea was there until I was sort of forced to look at it, which, if anybody is listening, that might sound a little familiar, right? So we just started looking at all the doctors that we had worked with who were practice owners and how big their hearts are, how determined they are to do things differently, how much they want to contribute to their communities, and how strapped they were for time and energy, and how hard that was to recover, especially given their training and the background of stoicism and what's expected and all of that. So the short version is we love our doctors. We want them to be able to thrive in their business and have a life outside of work.
Awesome. And I suppose that by niching into only working with medical professionals, it really allowed you and your team to hone your skills as far as all of the different nuances of running a medical practice and all of that. Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest things, as you mentioned, there's no business training, none. And now I think that it's offered as an elective in some schools, but not all schools. And even so, what does 3 hours of business training really teach you?
Right.
General stuff, right? Maybe how to hire, which is extremely important. But yeah, that's a big piece of it, is that you, just because you could do all the things doesn't mean you ought to be doing all the things. And that's a recipe for burnout.
Right. Yeah. So if you want to kind of give us a little bit more insight into, when you come into a practice, and I'm going a little bit off script here because I'm feeling like I want to hear more about, like, are you looking at it from all aspects, from HR to payroll to marketing to, give us the broad scope of kind of, I'm Dr. Ginger. Hi, Tracy. You, right? I have a functional
Gotcha.
medicine practice here in Florida, and I need help with running my business.
All the things.
Right. I need help with
So,
everything, Tracy.
well, my background is in operations and leadership development. We stay in that lane. So we
Okay.
have a lot of professionals in our world. We have marketing folks who are, I understand the basics of marketing and why it's important. I know enough to be dangerous, so I'm really careful about that. But I do share with our clients, why marketing is important, and that marketing isn't, air quotes here, just, digital ads and things like that. It's from the moment that somebody enters your practice, either on the phone or through, an online form that they fill out, you're marketing to them. The second that they enter your realm, you're marketing. And so marketing in a large part is the experience. So that's a piece that I can support them with. If they want and need digital ads that are geo marked and all the things, of course, that's going to be a marketing professional who knows how to do that thoroughly.
Okay.
But we see that a lot of the things that the practices need, the owners are hesitant to invest in. So, if it's HR, it might be a small enough practice that you don't want a full-time HR person, but this is where maybe having some fractional support is really helpful for them. So we help them make those decisions. What we really see is overwhelm, exhaustion, and oftentimes the practice manager is also drowning. And so we will often work with the practice manager as well on leadership, delegation, support them with hiring. If they need a financial analysis, our CFO will come in. He's very strategic. He'll support them with, like, looking at the numbers and helping them based on what they have, forecast what's coming, and also what they can do to still meet their financial needs while also meeting their operational needs. So we are full spectrum in a sense, but a lot of it does not come directly from me.
Got it. Okay. I love that. So you're really focused on the operations and the leadership.
Yeah, we're
Okay. I
about
love.
efficiency, buying back time and energy for, especially for the doctor. Even if you don't have a top-down hierarchy in your practice, if you're the head of practice, people are looking to you, and you will be setting the tone for everything. So it's extremely important that you're able to show up to work most days at least 80%. So, yeah.
Yeah. I talk to my docs often about this, like the level of dedication that it takes to be a physician and to practice medicine is so higher level than the majority of the workforce is ever going to see.
Yes.
And so a lot of times I see operational challenges because the physicians expect the employees to care as much as they do, work as hard as they do, educate themselves as much as they do. And I tell my docs, that's not going to happen
Yeah, it's not going to
because
happen.
they are just not at your level. In order to be who you are, you had to be like almost superhuman, right? Anybody that goes through 15 years of education and then, continues to do continuing education and then opens a business. I mean, these people, their work ethics are like so next level. Nobody is ever going to be able to live up to that. Right. And I always remind them of that because it's like, you can't expect this 22-year-old that just graduated from MA school to like have the same work ethics that you do. It's just not going to happen. So I love that you're helping with that. And yes, I want, very much to help physicians, stop getting burnout, right? And have more life balance. And, we see that with them trying to handle the operations, trying to do their own marketing. And, I tell them as soon as you can outsource to somebody like Tracy or somebody like me or somebody else. It doesn't have to be us, but as soon as you can afford to outsource these type of things to professionals like us, do it, because then you can focus on what you really are good at, which is practicing medicine. And then with that extra little bit of time that you might have left, you can spend that with your family.
Yes. Oh,
Right?
eureka. What a concept, right? And not be looking at your device or trying to like sneak in and do something between, I don't know, between plays at your child's, sporting event or something, just that you
Yes.
can be present, truly present when it matters to you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, touching on that, I had a friend of mine that had gone through a traumatic thing with one of her children. And, she has 3 younger children. And, I asked her, based on your experience of what you went through with your child, what is the most important thing, about being a parent? Because I'm not a parent. And she was like, being present. Even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes in a day, that being actually present for that 10 or 15 minutes is more important than 8 hours of you just, them being in the background and not really having a one-on-one eye contact, you know, deep relationship. And I thought that was interesting that, presence is really the most important thing to children. And they don't know it, but, that, in hindsight always comes back to be super important.
It's so
Um,
true. It's so true. My kids are to date 19, almost 20, and 22. And
okay.
they talk about how, our when we would sit down to family dinner, how all devices were away from the table. It was just dinner. And it might not be very long, but that was always the thing. And the conversations that we would have, the things that we would talk about, the depth, arranging the gamut from silly, weird things to like deep, deep, deep philosophical conversations and everything in between. And whenever their friends would come over, they would be like, wow, this is like Tuesday night dinner at your house. My kids are like, yeah, yeah, welcome
It's
to our
funny
life.
'cause I'm 54, my mom's 84, and my sisters are a little bit younger than me, but we still talk about, we didn't have cell phones back then, so we didn't have to worry about the digital devices. But my mom, when we sat down to dinner, would make us play the compliment game. And it drove us crazy
I love it.
because, as sisters, we were competitive, we were always arguing. And she was like, okay, so tell me something nice about your sister. And I'd be like,
Oh.
I don't know. She has nice curly hair, but
Right.
looking back on that those are the moments you remember, right? I remember the
Absolutely.
trips with my families. I remember the sit down dinners. So
Yep.
we don't want to get into we're not here to talk about family, but it is important to note that, because I know a lot of physicians feel like they're missing out, on being a part of their family. And you and I, Tracy, are here to tell them you can be a part. You might not be there as much as you'd like, but when you are there, be super present, like really make it
Yes.
about them. And I think that's
Absolutely.
really important.
Yeah.
So can you share how your experience, Tracy, in leadership and strategic planning and mindset works intersects in the world of medicine and how medical offices are run?
Well, I think first and foremost, I don't lead with mindset. I think that would put a lot of people off because that seems very vague. But, we do the mindset work. Like once we've established trust and once we understand like what the tactical things are and the strategy and their vision and all of that. But the thing that we do first is we slow way down. And I will just tell you right here, full disclosure, none of my clients like that part.
No,
Uh,
because they're used to going a million miles a minute.
no, I mean,
Yeah.
every entrepreneur is like, why do you want me to slow down? There's 12 goalposts I'm aiming for right now, So I get it, and we all like to be in charge. That's why we start or purchase businesses, right? Both hands in the air here. I love being in charge. Um, and it's the thing that gives the most insight. And what I beat this drum all the time, clarity equals speed. So if we slow down enough to get super clear about what's really important, what do you really, really want for your practice? I think another piece, this really businessy piece, had you thought about having something to sell when you want to retire? Please tell me that that's at least something you'll consider. Don't just shutter and move on with your life. You have a legacy. Also, that's a potential pretty large sum of money that could come in to boost your retirement, which is great, right? Or generational wealth, or whatever you want to put that toward. We slow down, we get really, really clear. What do you want, for the long term? What do you want for the medium term? And what do you want personally? And I think because our work is so holistic that way, we look at everything through physical body, through spirituality, if they have it, or, some other practice of theirs. What kind of legacy do they want to leave? What are their relationships like? And, caveat, I'm not a therapist, I'm an MBA, but at least I know enough to make sure that that priority gets the attention that it deserves, especially their relationships. Is connection is so important in our well-being across the board. So we get clear on that and we slow way down, and then we're able to go. And usually by about 90 days, our clients start seeing a return on their investment. A lot of times our clients recoup their full year investment before they've even paid for a full year of work with us, because they start to see the inefficiencies, or they start to see gaps, or they get more comfortable in their decision making. And in delegation. So they start to be less control-y, right? I mean, I love control, and my team probably would say it another way, and because they're gentle and kind, but be true. I'm an entrepreneur because I love to be in control. Most of the physicians that we work with also really like to be in control. Yeah. And it's a thing that holds us back. So that clinical mindset doesn't translate well to business if you bring all of it. So we do, for those that might be watching a video, we do actually a cognitive exercise where we take off the clinical hat and we set it on a little shelf to the side. We pick up the CEO's hat and we put that on top of the head and we get strategic. And so it kind of helps with the money thing too. It's like attaching dollar figures to human beings for whom, we've taken an oath. It starts to feel weird. But as a strategist, thinking about what's most important to increase the bottom line, to improve profitability, to give raises to ourselves, to our team, to, invest in the business, all the things, that becomes extremely important. It's so hard to do that if your clinician's hat is on. So we take it off and we put on the CEO hat. And so that's the kind of mindset work we do. I mean, if you want to go deeper, 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 it might be maybe working with someone else, like a therapist, or with, and if you're spiritual, maybe a spiritual advisor or something. But just kind of recognizing, I want these things to happen. I've now slowed down to get really clear. We've figured out what steps need to be taken. Usually we work in like a year framework, and then we'll go from there. And then you can chunk it down and then start taking steps. And some of those steps are delegation. And that's the big one right there, really, is how do you recover time and energy? It's by being an effective delegator, and quicker decisions, right?
So important. So important. Yeah. I mean, you've touched on so many important points there. You know, I'll go back to mindset. I think mindset is so extremely important. And, being married to a physician, being the president of the Florida Medical Association Alliance, working on physician burnout, working on preventing physician suicide, and seeing firsthand how it's really hard for physicians when they are struggling to get the help. And, sometimes you need somebody like a business advisor or a marketing person, because I've done it too. I've given people some advice on, hey, you really need to, consult a therapist about this because
Yep.
it's really impacting your life. And, I always liken mental health to physical health, right? At
Absolutely.
some point, we're all gonna need to go to the doctor because we, have a cold, or we broke our arm, or whatever. I believe the same thing is true for mental health. I believe that at some point in everyone's life, they are going to have a mental health crisis. It could be
Yes.
losing your dog. It could be losing your job. It could be losing a parent or a loved one. There's going to be a point where you're going to need somebody to talk to about things that are really distressing you. And I think physicians by nature, clinicians by nature, tend to hold that in and be like, well, I'm the doctor. God forbid I have to be perfect. I can't talk to anybody about any of the issues that I'm struggling with. And then
Yeah.
that impacts everything, because now they're stressed out, they're upset, and everybody around them knows, right? You can feel it. The business can sense it. You can't hide that. So I think mindset is super, super important. And I love, love, love the cognitive training that you do with taking off the clinical hat. I always talk to people when I do a lot of mentoring, and I help with, a little bit on the operational side. I do some business consulting. It's not something that I promote because it's something that it's really, if that clinician and I really work well together and we really respect each other, and then I will offer those services. So when I'm doing those kind of things, and I get pulled into that, I often say the same thing to the clinician. It's like, okay, I need you to stop being a doctor right now, right? And let's think about this, this person, right? Or this situation, as a human, right? Or let's talk about this from the business perspective. And it is so important for them because we're in the clinical mindset. Again, clinical mindsets up here at that level of perfection. And I always tell people, I'm like, people do not understand the pressure that physicians are under. Okay. If they make a mistake, somebody dies. If you make a
Yes.
mistake, Tracy, or I make a mistake, or the majority of other, industries in the world, anyone makes a mistake, nobody dies.
Right.
That puts an a pressure on somebody that is really not discussed and is really not understood by a lot of people. So I love that you're really, kind of, making sure that they understand the different dynamics. And yeah, I mean, let's put on the CEO hat. Let's know what the lifetime value of a patient is, right? Let's know
Yeah.
our numbers, right? So important. So important.
Yeah.
All
It's
right.
so
So
important.
one of your missions is helping providers scale their practices without sacrificing their well-being. What are some of the most common time and energy traps you see healthcare providers falling into?
Doing all the things, either because it's just there right now, and so you're just going to do it and get it out of the way, which sometimes is okay, or sort of being in that place of getting involved in everything, even when your team is very capable of handling it themselves.
My,
Um,
otherwise known as micromanaging.
Micromanaging, and there are certain details that require micromanagement because they're micro details, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
if we can reframe that, right, from being this thing like we're just on top of everybody all the time to recognizing what details do need the micro detail management and then what don't. And also the question is, does it require, pretend like I'm the physician for a moment, does it require just me? Am I the only person who can do this? Because if I am the only person who can do this, then my best bet is to block some time to focus on those types of details at the same time. So we can harness some hyper focus, so we can shut down distractions and get the things done. When we work on like time management, which we call time leadership, because management, in my mind, it's semantics. I'm a linguist, but it matters to me. So management, in my mind, is managing certain details for someone else's goals. So, middle manager type people, your practice manager, they probably want to manage their time according to the goals that you have for the practice and that they need to fulfill. As the leader of the practice, leadership of your time is so much more important than management. So it's not how do I get more things done? It's how do I get the right things done in a timely fashion so that they have a higher outcome, right? So is that, for example, if you're multiple providers in your practice, do you need to see every single patient for something, basic standard care? Or could you possibly be at a higher billable rate for certain consultations, right? And then see the more complex cases, for example, right? But when we work on that time leadership, we look at like the A category. What are the things that only you can do? And that means clinically and on the business, growth and administration and strategy side of things. And it's a little bit of a frustrating process because we like to all go so fast. When I go through this process with my own coach and mentor, I kick and scream and gnash my teeth the entire time. So I want you to know that you might not like it. And if somebody works with me, I always tell them I can handle it if you don't like me for the first month, because you're going to start making more money. You're probably going to start sleeping better. Your family's going to notice that you're like happier. It's just going to be great, right? If you can hang with me for those, first 4 to 6 weeks where we're slowing down and getting clear about what only you can do, and then prioritizing that time, I think that's the biggest trap, really. And the mindset work just works its way in there, because then you have the questions. You don't have to go changing who you are. You don't have to stop liking being in charge or even in control. You just recognize from a really practical perspective what really belongs on your plate and what doesn't. And, presumably you've hired a great team who would love nothing more than to be able to shine and take some things off your plate. They probably care more than you think they do, actually.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it reminds me of a story. Years ago, I was working with a pain doctor and his wife, and they were just opening the practice, and they didn't have any clue. They both just graduated from med school. They were opening this practice. And I remember them saying that, they needed, some help, to open the practice. And so I knew a very qualified practice management consultant. And so I called her up and I'm like, hey, I could use help. And she was like, great. And she was like $75 an hour or something like that. So this is 20 years ago or whatever. And so, but I said, but she's like, for you, Ginger, since it's your client, I'll do it for $50. And I was like, okay, great. So I go back to the client and I'm like, hey, I found a, practice management consultant is available to come in and help you out. And they were like, well, how much is that going to be? And I'm like, well, normally she charges 75, but she's going to do it for 50 since, it's a friend of mine. And they're like, well, that's so expensive. And I remember, I remember Tracy vividly. I immediately said, well, with all due respect, doctor, how much do you charge per hour? And he was like, well, about $350. I said, right. So she's
Right.
going to do for you for $50 an hour, the stuff that you don't know, and is going to save you hours and hours and hours of your time. So you have to look at it like this is actually going to save you money.
Yes. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially.
Right.
Right. I
Exactly.
know
Right.
it's
So
hard. It's hard. We have to look at it as an investment rather than a cost, right?
yes,
On
I love
your,
that.
on your spreadsheet, it's a cost, right? But in our mind, it's an investment, and there's always a return. There's always,
Yes.
if you do the work and you implement what you've learned, there's a return. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, micromanaging too, it's, I tell my team all the time, I said, a lot of our clients are surgeons and they're very detail oriented. So they're going to notice stuff that most people wouldn't. Right.
Yep.
And so I think sometimes it's hard for them not to micromanage because they see stuff that other people don't see. So
Well,
it's,
they
but
literally repair organs in people's bodies,
exactly,
So we have mad
exactly.
respect for that level of detail. Please and thank you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. And then, so how do you coach your clients to reclaim their time while also growing a thriving, impactful practice?
The most important thing is clarity, getting super clear about all the things that they want and then connecting to a why, sort of, a la Simon Sinek. Like what is the big why? What anchors you to your purpose? And if you can always come back to that, what and why? What do I really, really, really want? And the rest can be quiet for now. And then why is this important to me? It will help you stay extremely focused. You can shut down the noise or you can move things to different categories in your time leadership quadrant. You can delegate to like, okay, this
Sure.
is interesting. I'm going to let it sort of marinate in the background for the next quarter because we're working on this. But taking that time to get really, really clear is actually what helps us speed up and scale up the practice. You get faster with your decision making. You get more clear about what risks you're willing to tolerate, right? Because that's the other thing that cannot come over from the clinical side. Like on the clinical side, it has to follow a direct line for the most part. And in business, we make data backed, but we do take leaps of faith sometimes. And we need to be willing to take that leap and trust that if it goes a little bit sideways, there's a slight correction to bring it back on course, unlike you wouldn't do that in a surgery, for example. So we have to separate those two things out as well.
Right. Yeah. Building a business is kind of like building a plane in the air, right?
Kind
You're,
of. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
my business coaches tell me too, the same thing that you were talking about, that philosophy of actually slowing down actually speeds up the success process, which is counterintuitive, but my mentors have told me that same thing.
Well, if
You
you
probably
think of
understand all the psychology behind it. I don't. I just listen and say, okay, I'm going to slow down, whatever you say.
well, and sometimes I just will say to a client who's like really prone to analysis paralysis, I'll just be like, trust the process. Trust the
Right.
process. There's not a single thing that I'm going to work on here with you that isn't backed by good psychological, deep data backed research. So if you just trust that
Right.
just for today and take this one step, because I do a lot of coaching, but sometimes my philosophy is you cannot You cannot Socratic methodology yourself into something you absolutely have no knowledge of. Like, I do not have intrinsic knowledge of marketing. I've learned about marketing over the years. So you could ask me every which way if I have something inside of me that might enlighten me to what the next step is in marketing. And I'm going to be like, nah, can you just tell me what's next?
Right.
So I just respect that. And that's,
I'm the same
yeah.
way when it comes to operations. Like I know enough to be dangerous. And then I typically, like this one doc that I just helped, I found her like another physician actually, that has a training course on how to run this specific functional hormone practice. And I was like, you need to go and
Yes.
do this because this is
Yes.
what's going to help you get to the next level. Because I don't understand how a medical practice runs. Like I
Yeah.
understand operations, big picture, but
Yeah.
the inner workings of a medical practice, I'm clueless. So yeah, you're right. You can't, that just doesn't come by osmosis. You have
No,
to
and I
actually
don't.
learn it by doing it.
Totally. And sometimes my clients are like, "Can you just tell me?" And the caveat that I put around that is I can just tell you what to do, but if you have a mental block that's showing up, then that's where Socrates comes into play. And we're going to ask some questions and see if we can, unearth the cause, the root cause sort of that blockage. And
Right.
but otherwise, if you don't know how to hire a marketing professional, I'm not going to ask you if you've got it somewhere deep in your soul. Like, you just don't. And so we're going to talk about what you need to look for. And I'm just
Right.
going to tell you. And I'm probably going to provide something in writing so you can refer back to it. Like, you
You
know,
know, and
yeah.
as a marketing, person that specializes in medical, you can refer them to me, Tracy. But what I would
Yes.
say is, and I would tell my doctors this too, whether you hire me or somebody else, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Hire somebody that's got endorsements. Hire somebody that can
Yes.
give you the name of 3 doctors that they've worked for many years that is going to back them up because there's a million marketing companies out there.
Yes.
Everybody, every marketing company can do social media. Every marketing company can do Google ads. I mean, we can all do that. What sets you apart is your experience, the knowledge of the type of business that you're working with, and the credentials, right? The
Yes.
references,
Yep.
how many, and I pride myself on that. After 10 years in business, I still maintain, a 4.9 5-star review. And, I have tons of physicians that I could give references for. So that to me is my biggest achievement, right? Not the money, the respect that I've gotten and the appreciation that I've gotten. So that I
For
think is,
sure.
and
Yeah.
then
And I
last,
think it's,
go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, I think it's really important because healthcare is so different. It's probably the most regulated industry. It's constantly changing. It's changing so rapidly that sometimes even, the professionals are scrambling to keep up with it. So I always also recommend, if you're going to hire a professional for anything to do with your practice, make it be somebody who specializes, or that company has like under their umbrella an
A division.
area for
Yeah,
healthcare.
of
Yeah.
specialty. Yep, I 100% agree. Because if you don't know HIPAA, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
All right, and then the last question I have for you is, what strategies do you recommend to prevent burnout and maintain a sustainable business model in this line of work?
The key is understanding that burnout starts in the early stages, things that look like the model physician. I've just a couple weeks ago taught a CME actually out. I got to go to Yosemite to teach a CME
Oh,
workshop.
fun.
I
That's
know, I'm
awesome.
not mad about that at all. And it was on burnout prevention. And I think the key is recognizing that what looks like a model physician is the beginning stages for burnout. So recognizing the key is you're going to work hard. You're likely going to work a lot of hours. We can accept this. Throw the idea of balance out the window. We talk about harmony instead of balance because balance, it's never going to happen.
You're
You're
right,
already
Tracy.
working
There's
more
no
hours
such
than you're home.
that's a facade. That's right.
It's a joke, right? So, I mean, I'm like, for people who are watching, like,
I
balance, we
love
want it to
harmony.
be right in the middle. We're here all the time. Anybody who works full time is out of balance. So we're not looking
Right.
for balance. We're working for harmony. And if you think about musical instruments or voices, one is a little off key for like a second. It's kind of like, eh. And if they fix it, It's great and it comes back. But imagine going to like the symphony and having one violin out of tune the entire time. By the time you leave, your
Oh,
nerves are shot. Everybody's nerves, that would never happen, right? But that's the key, right? So recognizing when you get out of harmony, you're never going to be in balance. So you might work a lot, but if you start justifying moving of the goalposts and shifting of priorities, you're on the slippery slope toward like full blown burnout, like the scary that we hear about, especially with physicians, because it is insidious.
yeah, it's
It
chronic
is,
fatigue. I
it's
mean, it's
insidious.
really a
Yeah.
disease. Hmm.
And it's a systemic issue. So you're not to blame. I think that's the other piece of it. You're not to blame. It's a
Right.
systemic issue. And it's been, a slight turning up of the volume and the temperature over the last 40 odd years that we've seen like how commodified healthcare is and just whether it's a single payer system, it doesn't matter across the board. I talk to physicians and work with physicians around the world. It does not matter what industry it is, or excuse me, what system it is, you still have to deal with the fact that it's commodified. It is what it is. There's not much that we can do about that. But recognizing if you're starting to you're starting to justify shifting your values in order to continue working, you are on a very slippery slope. I think that's the key right there.
I
And
love
the
that.
second piece that I would say is have a community that loves you enough to be really honest with you and take you by the shoulders and say, I see you changing. I see you changing, and it's time to get some support. And the third piece I would say is, it used to be so stigmatized for physicians to have a therapist. Now, I think if you have a business, you ought to have a therapist, period, full stop. You want all your buttons pushed? Start a business, right? You want
I agree.
all the
I
weird
always, I
childhood stuff
agree.
to
I
come
think,
up? Yeah.
yeah, I think having a therapist is no
Yeah.
different than having a primary care physician. And
Totally.
I
Yeah.
think the reason why that's important is because remember earlier I talked about you're gonna have a mental health crisis
Yes.
at some point.
Yes.
That is not the time to find a therapist when you're in triage
Mm-mm.
situation. You
Yeah.
want somebody that knows you, knows your
Yeah.
dynamics, knows who your children are, knows all of your family dynamics, so that when you hit crisis, they're like, "This is exactly, I got you.
Yes.
Here's what we're gonna do."
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's so I
Yeah.
love that, and I love the fact that you're really making burnout prevention a part of your practice, Tracy, because you're right. The the business of medicine has made it so like almost like um expected that a physician should see 50 patients a day
Oh,
and then go home and spend 4 hours doing their notes and then get up the next morning at 5 a.m. and do surgery. This is
yeah.
insanity,
It's
right? So
pure insanity. It's so
the level that
inhumane,
is
really.
set for them is nobody can survive that. And that's why we have such high burnout rates. And so even when
Yeah.
you go into your own practice, I think sometimes they're like, oh, well, I should be seeing more patients. No. Does it work for you to see more patients?
Yeah.
Or is it going to take time from you being able to go to the gym and get that workout in that is so important for your mental health? Or that
Yeah.
time that you want to spend with that 5-year-old boy that's been waiting all day to see his mommy or daddy, right?
Yep.
And we all know. So I'm so glad that you're doing that. Thank you so much because
Yeah.
I think a lot of business coaches, they're all about the money, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think if you don't take the human side of it into account and work on that, it's not full picture. So
If
I
our
love that you're doing a
clients,
very well-rounded program.
oh, thank you. Thank you. One of our guiding philosophies is if the quality of our clients' lives doesn't improve, why are we doing this?
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I rarely go over I try to keep it at 30 minutes, especially because my clinicians are always, in clinic. But thank you so much for going over a little bit in time with us today and taking some extra time with us today, because I think this is a really important podcast. How can
Mm.
our listeners connect with you? How can my clinicians and my providers find you and learn more about your coaching programs or join the Thriving Practice community?
I think the easiest way, we have two websites that you can go to. So the Thriving Practice Community is thrivingpracticecommunity.com. And if
Perfect.
you can schedule a call with me, I'm no pressure. Like I just want to talk about what's possible and see if there's an insight I can provide. And if you feel like that's enough, then I just ask that you tell me, like, keep me posted. How's it going? Because we love, love, love celebrating success. And if you feel like you'd want some help with that, then of course, if I feel like we're a fit and we can actually support you, I'll invite you to work with us. It's just that simple. So that's
I
what I would
love
say,
that.
thrivingpracticecommunity.com.
And you mentioned another website. What was the other website?
practicesuccess.co. That's our parent company. That's the one that focuses more on my work. So it's, the
Got it.
coaching and the consulting, and our podcast is there. So practicesuccess.co. You can find out everything about us on that page as well, or on that website as well.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today. And I hope that, and I was just thinking the same thing, because I'm like you, I'm no pressure. It's like, I didn't used to be this way. I used to be like, oh yeah, if you're a provider, I'll work with you. I'm done with that. 2026, I'm like, are we in alignment? Are we on the same page? Do you like me? Do I like you? It's gotta, there's a lid for every pot. I'm not for
Totally.
everyone. I'm not for
Yes.
everyone. So thank you
Yeah.
for mentioning that. I love that. And
Mhm.
thank you again for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
It's my pleasure. Thank
Have a
you.
great day and happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays to you.
Best wishes for the new year.